My name is Isidra A. Hicks, and I was 34 years old when my father raised his glass at Sunday dinner and decided who mattered in our family. The roast was already half gone, the same dry cut my mother insists on making every week, the same forced small talk floating over the table like background noise. I had been sipping my wine slowly, not because I wanted it, but because I already felt something coming. My mom had been acting strange all afternoon, fluttering around the kitchen like we were expecting royalty instead of just another version of the same meal, the same roles, the same quiet expectations. Rachel sat across from me, posture loose, plate barely touched, her nails freshly done. She had given another vague update about her job search earlier, something about circling back and waiting to hear. The same phrases she'd been recycling for years. No one challenged it. No one ever did. My dad stood up halfway through the meal. He does this thing where he imagines himself as some kind of wise patriarch, delivering heartfelt speeches like we're all characters in a made-for-TV movie. He cleared his throat, raised his glass, and looked directly at Rachel. "To your sister," he said, pausing for effect, "our true provider." I blinked. I actually looked around the table, half expecting another sister to materialize. Rachel smiled slowly, like she'd just been handed something she'd been owed. My mom dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin, eyes shining, like this was a proud moment. I looked back at Rachel's plate, then at her hands, then at the memory of my bank app, lighting up over the years with charges that weren't mine. I set my fork down carefully and smiled. "Great," I said. "Then she can provide for herself this month. My part ends today." The table went silent. Rachel's mouth fell open. I think she expected me to laugh afterward, like I was joking. I wasn't. My mom leaned in and whispered, "Don't make a scene." "I'm not," I said, standing up. "I'm making an exit." I picked up my bag and walked out without looking back. I heard the scrape of a chair behind me, but no one followed. That was when I knew I'd shocked them into silence, which for my family is rare. What they didn't say at that dinner mattered more than what they did. Rachel hasn't had a real job in 5 years. Not since college. Everything she's tried lasts 3 months at most, but she's never short on cash. Rent, groceries, car payments, trips, emergencies that somehow never end. At first it was just stepping in. Then it became expected. My parents helped, sure, but barely. Their version of helping was calling me and asking if I could just handle this one thing. What hurt wasn't the money. It was the lie they all agreed to live inside. That Rachel was trying. That she was in a tough season. That the world just hadn't recognized her yet. Rachel didn't want to work. She wanted to be adored for doing nothing, and she was getting exactly that with interest. That night, I sat alone in my apartment replaying the last few years. Canceled vacations, unexpected transfers, home repairs that turned into credit card bailouts, her flight to Tulum last summer, the mattress she raved about, all mine. I had let it happen because I thought it made me responsible, dependable, good. That toast shattered that illusion. The next morning I got to work. I wasn't angry. I was efficient. I transferred the lease on Rachel's apartment into her name, or tried to. She didn't qualify. That's why I'd co-signed. So instead, I submitted a move-out notice and scheduled a final inspection. 30 days. Then I canceled the utilities. All of them. Water, electric, Wi-Fi, gone. I blocked every unfamiliar auto payment. Turns out Rachel was still using my Amazon Prime, Uber Eats, even my Spotify family plan. She noticed fast. "Hey, something's wrong with the power," she texted. I didn't answer. 3 hours later, "Did you cancel the internet? What the hell?" Still nothing. That night, my mom called twice. I watched the phone ring and go quiet. By the end of the week, my silence was louder than anything I could have said. But I was just getting started. Rachel didn't reach out again after the power went out. Not directly, anyway. Instead, she pivoted the way she always did when reality pressed too close. She went public. Her Instagram stories turned into black screens with white text, vague enough to dodge accountability, but specific enough to bait sympathy. Some people only love you when you're useful. Growth hurts. Betrayal comes from those closest to you. I watched them without reacting, letting her warm up the audience before the performance really started. My parents escalated in their own way. Mom left a voicemail pretending nothing was wrong, asking if I was coming to church on Sunday, as if I was going to slide into the pew beside her and nod along like we hadn't just detonated years of silence. The next day she called again, this time crying, real sobs, saying I was tearing the family apart, that Rachel was fragile, that this wasn't who I was. I didn't pick up. I knew the script too well to confuse emotion with accountability. Dad tried logic, or at least his version of it. He sent a long email laid out like a proposal, bullet points and all, outlining the unseen ways Rachel contributed to the family. Emotional value, creative energy, inspiration. He used phrases like non-monetary contributions, written with absolute seriousness, as if belief alone could pay rent. Reading it felt like peeking behind the curtain of a shared delusion. They truly believed she was a provider because she gave them a reason to keep hoping she'd change. That belief didn't start in adulthood. It was baked into us early. When I brought home straight A's, they said I was responsible. When Rachel half finished an art project, they said she was gifted. When I bought my first car, they warned me not to rub it in. When Rachel totaled hers, they said she was going through a rough time. The pattern didn't evolve as we grew up. It just got more expensive. A week after the dinner, Rachel finally texted again. This time soft and careful. Hey, I know you're upset, but can we talk? I didn't answer. An hour later, I don't know what I did to deserve this. That one made me laugh. I almost typed out a list. Instead, I made another call. The storage unit. It was under my name. I'd paid the deposit and monthly fee for nearly 2 years. It held her art supplies, mostly unopened paint sets, and half-broken furniture she claimed she was refurbishing. I shut it down and told them to dispose of whatever remained if she didn't retrieve it within a week. 3 days later, she showed up at my building, unannounced, buzzed the intercom over and over like volume alone could force compliance. I didn't let her in. I watched from my window as she paced, yelled into her phone, probably calling our parents, and finally stormed off. That night, Mom called again. I let it ring. Then she texted, "You're being cruel. Family is everything." I stared at the message for a long time, then replied, "Then you and Dad can start treating Rachel like family, not a fragile little queen who needs constant tribute. I'm out for real this time." She didn't respond. A few days later, Rachel's landlord called me. Apparently, she hadn't been paying her half of the rent, the half I'd been covering. He mentioned eviction. I gave him a simple answer. Not my problem. Saying it out loud felt like breathing fresh air after years in a sealed room. By week 3, everything started caving in, not for me, but for them. Rachel went quiet. No texts, no calls, no dramatic apologies. That's how I knew she was spiraling. She only disappeared when she was too embarrassed to ask directly or when she was busy rewriting the story so she could survive it. Meanwhile, Mom went on a quiet campaign, calling extended family, friends, anyone who would listen. She framed it like I was under stress at work, that I wasn't myself, that I'd always been intense. The irony of blaming the same career they'd relied on for years wasn't lost on me. My cousin Jenna sent a screenshot of a Facebook post Mom made, a picture of Rachel in their backyard holding tea with a caption about keeping your children close no matter what. I didn't react. I was done writing footnotes for my boundaries. That same week, I got an email from a property management company. Rachel had listed me as a reference for a rental application. They asked for employment verification and income confirmation. I replied honestly, I can't verify anything. She's not employed, and I'm not financially connected to her. She didn't get the place. That's when the spiral went fully public. Rachel posted a 7-slide Instagram story, black background, white text, about trusting the wrong people and being forced to rebuild from the ground up after betrayal. Slide 5 framed financial consequences as emotional abuse. I almost admired the precision. What really pushed things forward was the car, the one she'd been using indefinitely, technically Dad's second car. She backed it into a mailbox 2 days after moving home. No insurance. Registration expired. Tickets piling up. Dad called and left a voicemail asking me to step in because it would be good for the family. I laughed out loud and blocked him. It was the first time I'd ever blocked my father. There wasn't even an argument, just a clean break. 2 days later, Mom emailed again. No greeting. We're doing our best. Rachel is trying. You've made your point. Can we move past this? I archived it. They still thought this was a phase, a tantrum I'd outgrow. They thought waiting would fix it. The problem was, this was normal now. For the first time in years, I wasn't tired, stretched thin, or anxious. I was fine. Better than fine. Rachel wasn't, and I didn't rush to save her. The silence didn't last. It never does when people lose the one thing holding their world together. The first crack came through someone I hadn't heard from in almost a year, Rachel's ex, Evan. His name lit up my phone one afternoon while I was finishing up work, and for a second I considered letting it go to voicemail. Curiosity won. He didn't waste time with small talk. He asked if Rachel was okay. I asked why he was asking me. He said she'd shown up at his place the night before, crying, claiming she had nowhere to go. She told him I'd ruined her life, cut her off without warning, sabotaged her chances at moving forward. He asked if that was true. I told him he was free to believe whatever version of the story he wanted, but I wasn't explaining myself anymore to people who only reached out when Rachel showed up in pieces. There was a pause on the line. Then he said something that stuck with me. He said the house had been starting to feel it too. I thanked him for the honesty and hung up. That same weekend, my cousin Jenna went to my parents' house for a visit. She texted me afterward, one sentence at first, then another. Rachel was treating the place like a hotel, slamming doors, eating through groceries, taking 2-hour showers, asking for rides, complaining constantly about how unfair everything was. Jenna said my mom looked exhausted in a way she'd never seen before. Not worried, not sad, worn down. I didn't ask for more details. I didn't need them. I knew exactly how this played out. Rachel wasn't cute anymore. Not when the fantasy stopped working. Not when the castle they'd built her started catching fire from the inside. By week 4, I started hearing things from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old classmates, former friends of Rachel's, even someone she used to babysit for. She'd been calling around saying she was temporarily displaced, starting over after a betrayal. That phrase kept coming up. After a betrayal. Like she'd survived something catastrophic instead of facing the consequences of never taking responsibility. What surprised me wasn't that she was rewriting history. It was who showed up at my office. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was in a meeting when the front desk messaged me to say someone named Marissa was waiting. I recognized the name immediately. Rachel's friend from high school, the one who used to party with her, the one I'd caught stealing a pair of earrings from my room years ago when they both crashed at my apartment. I hadn't seen her since. She smiled like we were old friends and asked if we could talk privately. We sat in the break room and she pulled out a piece of paper. It was a GoFundMe summary. Rachel's name was right at the top. Marissa told me Rachel wasn't eating, that she was struggling, that the family had cut her off emotionally and financially. Then she leaned in and said the sentence that made everything click. She told me you're having a breakdown, Marissa said. That's why you're acting like this. I stared at her. Rachel hadn't just painted me as cold. She'd told people I was unstable, overworked, jealous, that I was taking things out on everyone because I couldn't handle the pressure. Marissa asked if I'd consider sharing the fundraiser, said it might mean something coming from me. I stood up, told her the conversation was over, and walked her out without another word. That night, I looked up the fundraiser. Fresh start for a survivor. The description was a full performance. Losing her home, abandoned by her only sibling, needing help to rebuild. There were photos too. One of her on a park bench wrapped in a blanket, one of a torn backpack and spilled makeup. She'd raised $672. I recognized 2 of the names. People from my college, people she hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't report it, I didn't comment. I just took screenshots and saved them. I was collecting pieces now. A few days later, an email arrived from my parents' lawyer. Short, polite, sterile. It requested a discussion about shared property, future financial contributions, and family support obligations. There were no threats, no demands, just the quiet assumption that I'd come back to the table if they framed it correctly. That's when I knew my parents weren't just flailing. They were scared. They'd built their safety net around my income, emergency accounts, refinancing, quiet transfers that kept the house running while they pretended everything was fine. They never said it out loud, but I could see it clearly now. Retirement was a fantasy. Dad's investments had dried up. Mom's savings were probably hanging in Rachel's closet on designer hangers. I didn't reply to the lawyer. I called the bank instead. I removed my name from the shared emergency account they'd opened years ago, just in case. Then I requested a full audit of every transaction made from it over the last 5 years. When the report came back, it was worse than I expected. Hotel stays, personal shopping, spa rides. most of the charges tied back to Rachel. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off, the city quiet outside, and felt something settle into place. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. It felt like the last piece of tape holding up a crooked picture had finally snapped. Then Evan called again. He said Rachel had shown up at his door laughing this time, not crying, laughing. She'd read the email from the lawyer and thought it meant I was folding. She told him I'd come back once I realized no one believed me. I thanked him for telling me and hung up. Then I booked a flight to Arizona. No one knew I was going. No one knew why. But my parents were about to find out, because the house they lived in, the one they told everyone they bought outright, the one they treated like proof of stability, was in my name. And I was done letting tenants trash the place. The house in Arizona was supposed to be a gift. That's how they framed it back when things were still polite, when my money was still spoken about with gratitude instead of entitlement. It had been my idea, not because I needed a second home, but because I believed stability was something you could buy for people you loved. I was 26, fresh off my first six-figure bonus, naive enough to think generosity would be remembered. We signed the paperwork together. My name went on the deed. I covered the mortgage. They were supposed to handle the taxes and upkeep. They said they'd pay me back. They never did. I hadn't been back in almost 4 years. The neighborhood looked the same, but the house didn't. The paint peeled at the corners. The lawn had dead patches. The Arizona sun they used to brag about had worn everything down except the pretense. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, key in my hand, steadying myself. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a correction. They were inside eating breakfast. I heard Rachel before I saw her, complaining about almond milk like the world owed her better options. My mom stood at the stove with her back turned. Dad sat at the table scrolling on his tablet, half awake. No one noticed me until I closed the door behind me. Rachel froze mid-sentence. My mom jumped like she'd been caught. Dad stood slowly, mug still in his hand, suddenly smaller than I remembered. I set the folder down on the counter. Deed, payment logs, dates, every transfer, every missed reimbursement, every quiet rescue laid out in black and white. This isn't a conversation, I said. This isn't a negotiation. My mom started crying immediately, the familiar sound that used to stop everything. Dad asked if this was a joke. Rachel laughed, actually laughed, and said I wouldn't do it. I told them they had 30 days to vacate the property. Formal notice would come through the mail. Locks would be changed on day 31, whether they were ready or not. Rachel slammed her spoon into the sink and stormed down the hall like a teenager, door rattling shut. My mom whispered something about family. I didn't listen. I handed my dad the paperwork and walked out. No threats, no shouting, just facts. I slept on the flight home like a child. The messages exploded after that. My mom alternated between begging and rage. Dad sent long paragraphs that read like speeches, heavy on history and light on accountability. Rachel posted a video titled, "When Your Own Blood Betrays You," thumbnail frozen on her crying face. I didn't watch it. Someone tagged me anyway. I didn't respond. 10 days before the move-out deadline, the property manager called. Rachel had tried to claim tenant rights. She didn't have them. Her name had never been on anything. She threatened to call the police. I told him to let her. Everything was legal. Friends started forwarding me screenshots. Rachel was telling people I was committing elder abuse, leaving our parents homeless, planning legal action. I laughed and forwarded it all to my attorney. That night, Rachel texted me one line. "You win. Hope it was worth it." It was. By the time the lockbox went up, they were gone. Movers came. I didn't ask where they went. I donated the junk. The fake plants, the cracked dishes, the ceramic angel my mom kept by the sink, all of it gone. The house was mine again, clean and quiet, ready to become what it should have been from the start, an asset, not a shrine to denial. After the movers left and the dust settled, the silence felt different. Not heavy, not tense, just clean. The house was empty in the best possible way, stripped of noise and expectation, no one asking for anything, no one waiting for me to fix what they refused to face. I didn't rush to fill it. I let it sit like that for a while, untouched, like proof that something had finally ended. Back home, life kept moving without them. I changed my phone number, closed old accounts, updated emergency contacts at work. I removed every login that still tied us together, streaming services, shared emails, even the airline account we'd all used for years. Each small cut felt less dramatic than I expected, more like housekeeping. Clearing out a space you've outgrown. My parents landed in a guest room at my dad's cousin's house. One bathroom, no cable. My aunt told me my mom had gone quiet, which was her version of miserable. Dad picked up part-time work at a local shop. They told people they were restructuring finances. I let them keep the lie. I didn't need the truth to be public to feel real. Rachel didn't disappear. She just shifted hosts. A cousin sent me a screenshot of her latest story, a grainy mirror. Selfie captioned, "Starting from scratch." Never scared me. She'd moved in with a guy she met at a bar, someone with a neck tattoo and a skateboard leaning against the wall in the background. I didn't flinch. She wasn't rebuilding. She was hiding, jumping from one enabler to the next, the way she always had. Weeks passed, then months. No surprise letters, no apologies disguised as wisdom, no attempts to pull me back in. The quiet held. The last message I ever got from my mother came on a Thursday evening. No greeting, no sign-off, just a single line. "One day you'll understand. When everyone leaves you, family will be all that's left." I stared at it, not with anger, but with a strange sense of clarity. She'd said some version of that my entire life. She just never understood what it actually meant to leave. I didn't reply. I didn't check in. I didn't wonder how they were doing. I didn't wait for the other shoe to drop. I stopped feeling responsible for what happened after I stepped away. Maybe someday one of them will try again. A birthday, a funeral. A carefully worded apology that sounds sincere enough to test the door. They'll wait a long time. I'm not angry anymore, but I am done. If they ever find themselves standing outside my door again, it won't be locked out of spite. It'll be locked because I already left and I'm not coming back.